So we've had a request in the Side Producers Forum as to how to do a mix of a specific length in the arrangement view of Ableton. Usually I see people using the session view, and I use the session view myself for performing, but I definitely have seen people using the arrangement view. Mostly these are producers who are playing their own music, and they don't care about DJing in the traditional manner so much as playing out the set of their music exactly the way they want it, with a very specific arrangement and specific timing. So there's going to be a couple things I'm going to be showing in this video, and it's going to be broken up into two main segments: arranging and editing the tracks that you're going to play, and then the details as to how you mix them. Now, the big difference in the way that you mix it is you could either do this live, so you could set it up so that your 3-band EQ on your tracks is controlled by you in that particular moment, like on stage, or you could automate the EQ so that it happens very smoothly and in a very precise way, so that it's perfect every time. Now, if you're doing this to upload the set, onto the internet for a studio mix or something, then automating all the parameters is probably the best way to go. If you're on stage, though, and you want to do something more than press play at the beginning of your set and just dance around while it's happening, then I would suggest that you go through the time and set up your own controller situation with your EQ and what other effects and things that you want to use. But for the first part of the video, I want to show you putting audio tracks into the arrangement view, editing them, warping them first, and then editing them, and then arranging them with other tracks, and how exactly you do that. So, I'm just going to open up my DJ organization software here. I use this thing called Rapid Evolution 3, and all that it does, it just houses all of the music that I have, and it has all the metadata here for me, like the tempo of it, the key, if I like it or not, all that stuff. You don't need any of this, but what I'm getting from this is the track. So I'm going to put in a track, and this track is at 144.8, which means it's probably at 145 BPM. So, and you could just as easily have, let's see, you could have this in a folder, and you could move that, into here just as easily. Well, it helps if you use an actual file, like that. But I use this thing. So, anyways, we know that this track is at the software told us it's at 145. So I set the master tempo to 145, and then click warp. And I usually just go on Sidetrance. Warping is usually fairly simple unless they put tempo changes and stuff in the track. So I just find the first kick drum, and it's already right on bar 32. I'm just going to align it a little more, and I'm going to right click and warp 145 BPM from here. So it's just going to try to warp this track from that point at 145. And usually, if you go to the end, the kick drum will be fairly close, and then you just have to nudge it back. This track, it didn't turn out that way, so I'm going to go back and see at what point it stopped working, because it's it's dead on here. Those kick drums are all fine, and it's still fine there. So let's go into the middle of the track. Okay, here it's deviating enough that I'm going to need to correct it, because that right there, that gap, that's no good. So I'm going to move this over, do that same thing, warp 145 from here, and still on. Well, it's deviating a little bit here again, so I'm going to correct it. I think that should probably be the last correction I need to do. All the other things are probably going to be sounding good. So I'm going to turn the metronome on, and I'm going to play it. Okay, so it's warped. But what I want to do now is I like to do a lot of editing to the tracks that I play, particularly in the context of a trance set, where you want to keep the energy moving for a large portion of the time. I don't like really long breaks when I'm DJing, so if a track that I'm going to play has a long break, I like to go and edit the breaks out. And I'll show you how I do that. So right here, it looks like there's a break of considerable length. And it doesn't kick back in for real until like 153. So right now, the marker snap is set to 2 bars, but I can hit like Control 1 to make it a 1 bar, or Control 2 to make it a 4 bar. So let's make this a 4 bar break instead of however long it is. So I'm going to go 4 bars past the break and hit Control E to split, and I'm going to do 4 bars before the beat comes back in and split and take that out. Now I'm going to overlap these by 4 bars. See how they're overlapping there? And now I'm going to crossfade those sections together. So I'm going to hit Control Alt F to open up the crossfader and just move this over. And now it should be a nice, clean 4 bar break. Alright, like that. So, no more break. And when you're done with that, you can select the whole thing and hit Control J to consolidate. And now you have your edited clip. And you can keep doing that if the track requires it. Say you really hate, like the track is super awesome, but then this segment is super foofy or whatever. You move this back, crossfade. Yeah, you can do that. You can do whatever you want. You could even do something really weird, like with this break here. You could chop that and reverse the sample there. I actually clicked reverse twice. So what does that sound like reversed? Sounds pretty weird. Or you could, like go in here and duplicate those. That. Crossfade those reverse segments into each other so they reverse for a little bit. Yeah, so you can make lots of little changes to the track if you want to. It's kind of like a little remix. Usually I just like to do the crossfade, the long breaks, and set myself up for a nice track there. So now we've got our one track. Now we need to pick another track and mix into that track. So let's do a track that's at 140. So let's put this track in here. Alright, this one's already worked, which is fine. And in terms of the algorithms that you're going to use for DJing, you have a couple different choices. You have repitch, which you should use if you are not going to change the tempo of the track away from its original tempo. It's the highest quality mode. It doesn't alter it at all if it's at its original tempo. But it does the vinyl thing. If you move the tempo up, it'll change the pitch, or move it down, it'll change the pitch. You have complex, which will attempt to keep the key of the track the same even if you change the tempo. I was using that for a while, and it definitely works, but it tends to degrade the upper end of tracks a little bit. Kind of sounds like a badly compressed MP3, sort of, at certain settings. So what I've been doing these days is using Beats mode set to 1/16th, and that seems to work great for heavily quantized dance music like psytrance, especially if you're moving away from the original tempo. By the way, if you set it for beats, whatever you do, don't leave it on transients mode. It'll sound like garbage. So 1/16 tends to work. So with this track, it's already warped, and it seems like the main beat comes in at around 32. Yeah, this is just like build up. Right. So we want to have this beat that comes in on like the end of bar 32. We want to mix that in at a good place here. So how do you arrive at a good mixing point? It depends on what you want to do with the mix. Do you want to do like a deeper mix where you're introducing elements of this song before this song is over, or do you want to do like a more simple intro outro mix where the bass from the new track comes in just as the bass from the old track is leaving? It depends on a lot of things. Now, if you're using software that allows you to do harmonic mixing, like I selected this track in here, and now it's any of these tracks that are highlighted in green, my software is telling me that, hey, these are harmonically compatible with this track and will probably sound good with that track. Now, the software can be wrong, of course, but it's usually pretty good. You could also just mix the songs together and hear if it sounds good to you, and if it does, you could just use it. So if you're doing like a longer, like a deeper mix, it's usually better if the tracks are harmonically compatible. Whereas if they're not compatible, probably best to do like a more simple intro outro mix with them. Just for the first mix, let's just do a more simple intro outro mix. We have to figure out where the bass leaves on this track. So I'll play this track. Right, so the bass doesn't leave, but there's like a little crescendo, and at 281 would probably be a good place to have new bass come in. So, time to bust out the calculator. Get 281 and take away 32, you get 249. So, if we put this track and started at 249, then at bar 32, it'll come in perfectly right at 281. However, this track at the beginning has lots of stuff in the low end going on. So while they're going to be set up to come in, it's probably going to sound a little messy if you play them right on top of each other without any EQ. Yeah, so it sounds really, really messy. And so when it does get to 281, yeah, it's in time they're in time with each other, but it sounds like garbage because they're trying to occupy the same spectrum. So now we're going to add EQ to this. There's a lot of different EQs out there. I use a little for my thing. It's just called DJ EQ. Where did it go? It wasn't here. Probably just, oh yeah, DJ EQ. So I use this, low, mid, high, but seeing as you probably won't have this, I'll just use the EQ3 for, explaining it. So, add an EQ3 to both tracks. Oh, not an EQ8, EQ3. And EQ3 just has, low, mid, and high, and kill switches for low, mid, and high. So it's a good, easy DJ EQ. So, here's where the difference comes between setting it up and automating it beforehand to be perfect, or doing it live with a controller, or if you don't have a controller, with your keyboard. So the way to do it for like a studio mix to get it perfect would be to go in and you click, let's take out the low end of this track before it punches in. So we click on the low and select the segment, hold down shift and bring this down. And actually for this, let's just leave it so that it cuts out the low completely and then brings it back in 100% at 281. And then we'll kind of do the same thing here, but we'll cut the bass at 281. So what's going to happen here is that no bass on this track, full bass on this track, and then once they switch, the bass will be completely taken out here and it will come in on this one. And if you don't like the sound of the extremely quick cut, you can back it up and make it more of a smooth transition. And you can continue doing that with the mid and the high to get it exactly how you want it. I'm going to just delete this automation for now, because what you should probably be doing is mapping these controls to knobs on your controller or keys on your keyboard. So if you have a controller, you hit Control M to go into MIDI map mode. You go in and you select these knobs. By the way, when you select them, you see that you can adjust the min and the max value. And with EQ3, it does go up to plus 6 dB. So if you leave it like that and you move your knobs to the max, you're going to be boosting your signal. Now, I tend to not do that. I tend to set my EQs up so that they don't boost at all. So the way that you do that is you select the max and you hit 0. Now, when I move my knobs, I mapped one of those to the same thing. Whoops. Now when I move this, even though I'm moving this all the way to the max, it doesn't go past 0, which is very useful. And then, if you have your automation arm enabled, and you hit record, and you move a knob, all that automation records in there for you. So, if you wanted to save yourself some time on your studio mix, you could set up your controls all the way you want it, and then make sure that your automation arm is enabled, and then hit record to start it, and then record the transitions that you make, and then you can edit them afterwards. It would probably be quicker and a little bit more instructive than just automating them all with your mouse, like such. If you don't have a controller with knobs or anything, you can still have some, control over what you're doing with your keyboard. You're not going to be able to get as fine of a control. You're not going to be able to smoothly adjust through that range. But if you hit Control K, you can map either the knobs or the kill switches to keys on your keyboard. However, you have to disable the computer MIDI keyboard in order for your keys to be able to have effect. And when you map something to keys, you don't get the fine control with the knobs. You just get 100% to 0%. So they're basically kill switches now. So you can play this, and then can kind of mix like that. So if you have a kill switch for, let's say the second track's low switch is 2, and the first one's is 1. Let me just take these out. Now when I hit 2, that low kill switch will be activated, and 1, that one will be activated. So right now, the second track's kill switch is not engaged, and the first track's is. So we're only going to hear. Let's move these up. We're only going to hear the second track's bass right now. We can switch that. Let me move this over so you can hear it a little bit better. So that's the first track's bass, and then I'm going to hit both 1 and 2 at the same time, and it switches to the second one. This is with no bass, or second bass. So there's lots of ways that you can do that, even if you don't have an actual MIDI controller. And this is, let me see, let's put this back where it was. And this is also the place where you could do tempo automation. So if, like, this track is at 145 and this track is at 140. So we could click on the tempo, right click to show automation, which brings up this lane. And then all you have to do is add in some points. And then over that period of time, it'll automate the tempo for you. And then you just sort of keep going. So we have this track. Let's play a track that's at 143 now. Alright, I like this Arthur track. It's a good track. So we have this track in here. And this one's already warped as well. I'm going to change it to beats. 1/16. So this track, let's do a more of a deeper mix with this track. So the beat comes in fairly quickly, but let's not have this track's bass take over until here. After this break ends, which I think is at 113. Right, so it kind of comes back in and has like a little crash cymbal and everything at 113. So that's actually the end of bar 112. So let's figure out in this track where we want that to happen. So how about at here? Okay, so let's have that segment come in at 241. So if we look at 241, it's bar 241 in the track. But it's 489 at this point in the arrangement view. So 489 minus, what was that? Is it? Yeah, 112 equals 377. So if we move this to 377, and then we're just going to automate the EQ to come in gradually over the course of that. Let's have the highs come in as well. We'll have the highs come in a bit sooner. And then the bass, I'll have that come in like that. And then on the second track, we'll just have the bass drop out there, and we'll have the mid and the high do a little bit. We'll keep it in there for most of the time, but then have it kind of back off. Over time. So now if we start this, you can hear that there's nothing coming out of here for a while, and then it starts to slowly come in. So you can hear that the new tracked elements are starting to sneak in while this one's still going. Now, if I was doing this, I would probably not have, the new song transition while the old song has like a break going in it. But just for the purposes of a longer beat remix, I think it's fine. Yeah, I'd probably cut out this section. It's probably too long of a break for me. And we'll just listen up until it transitions completely over to the new track's bass at 489. Yeah, and now you're mostly hearing this song driving it, and this one is now in the background and fading away. And so yeah, you just keep doing that. If you run out of space, you can take your warp, or your loop brace, move it over, and it'll give you more space to work with. So you just drag this out until it's at an hour. And then, yeah, you just kind of keep adding songs. Let's try. Just gonna put in a bunch of songs. They're like, I'll do this one, and this one, and this one, And then you go through and like make sure they're warped, and you're like, oh, I don't like, this segment sucks. We'll take that out. Crossfade that section together, consolidate. Don't let me consolidate. Oh. Yeah. And you just go through and you set up exactly how you want your set to be. Automate your tempo if you want to. And this is the point where you could also do some more interesting things for your live performance. For instance, seeing as all of your tracks are warped and everything, you could put in a MIDI track and drop in like your favorite instrument and write like a little melody for you to adjust during a certain like breakdown of the track, and you could bind some parameters like the cutoff and the resonance. Or if you're playing one of your own tracks, you could, take out that main lead from the track that you're going to be playing, and then put in, that melody in the actual instrument during that track. Like say this Annex Cleo track, say you're Annex Cleo, and your main lead from your Cosmopunk track is right here. You can take that out, take the lead out of your track that you're gonna take your lead out of the version of the track that you're gonna play out, and then put the actual instrument in alongside it. Map all the parameters that you want to your MIDI controller, and then when this comes through during this time, then that instrument will play, and you can tweak that live, which would be something you can do. You could just set up like an instrument and not have it be like triggered with MIDI clips. You could actually trigger it with a keyboard in that moment. You could send your tracks to a return track, which has effects on it, like a reverb or a delay, or you put like a glitcher program on there, like Stutter Edit or Glitch 2, or some beat repeats for some stuttering, and then you could send these out, and you can do that with like a knob, or with hitting Control K, going in, hitting, I don't know, like 4 or something, and then every time you hit 4, it'll toggle that from 100% to 0. There's a lot of things that you can do here. I'm not sure if there's anything else that I can really explain that would be helpful at this point in time. So yeah, I think that's it. I hope this was instructive, and if you have any other questions, feel free to reply to the comment, or feel free to comment, and I will get back to you. Cheers.